Heavy metal icon, voice of a generation, free speech crusader, miracle worker, actor, producer, husband, father, a modern-day Renaissance man, if you will. But the one thing Dee Snider of Twisted Sister fame cannot do is to allow a killer to go unpunished. In 2003, after his brother-in-law Vinny was gunned down mercilessly in broad daylight while on his way to work, Dee Snider and family decided that they weren't going to take it anymore and began working tirelessly to bring the killer to justice. But as the killer was still on the loose and just beyond their reach, strange, eerie happenings began taking place all over the Snider home, culminating in a ghostly message from beyond the grave. A message of hope. That there's nothing you can do about it. Just move on.
Welcome back to episode number 26 of Super Mystery Bros, the podcast that the New York Times once called the #1 best podcast in my apartment. My name is Nate, and with me again is a guy who, when our 10th grade geometry teacher looked him square in the eye and asked him, "Young man, what do you want to do with your life?" he said, "I want to rock." Kyle.
I can't believe you remember that.
Yeah, I remember a lot of things. Dear listener, as you may know, our show is known for nothing if not being entirely inclusive and politically correct. So therefore, Christmas is canceled this year. But today's December 23rd, so tonight we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to celebrate a Festivus for the rest of us, a time where we gather around an aluminum pole, eat some nasty-ass meatloaf, and take turns telling everyone at the table how much they've disappointed us over the past year. Kyle, it's time to air your grievances. What have you got, man?
I don't know, man. Grievances for who? For you? For everyone? I've got no grievances with you. The human race as a whole got a lot of grievances. Too many to list on this episode. That might be a special for another day.
Jesus Christ.
I know, man. I'm just the worst co-host.
All right, anyway. So first of all, Kyle, you've disappointed me by installing your audio plugins on an external hard drive instead of your main hard drive like a normal human being would, which ended up breaking them all and forcing me, Davis, to do extra work editing audio after the last episode and this one too, apparently. You also ruined episode 15 the same way, which was supposed to have been a big one. So I just want to let you know that I'm really disappointed in you. Well, and you really let me down big time, man.
Well, I do apologize for the error of my ways, and I will do better moving forward.
Well, apology accepted. Ivan's not here to air his grievances or to defend himself, but that's not going to stop me from airing my grievances against him. So, Ivan, if you're listening, I just want you to know how disappointed I am that you don't make yourself available enough to do more episodes. And I'm sure that I speak not just for myself, but for all of our listeners. Davis, you're cool. Washbrick Show, I'm disappointed in you because it was one of your videos that we clicked the like button on that for some reason caused Meta to permanently delete our first Instagram account. So thanks a lot, dick. Last but not least, the person I'm most disappointed in is you, dear listener, for not taking the time to rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Some of you have, and if you have, I'm not talking about you. But we spend hours of our lives on a weekly basis creating the show for free, without ads, and you so much won't even take 5 seconds of your time to hit the 5-star button on our show or write something nice to say about us, or even not nice, even mean and nasty. I just wanted to let you all know that my disappointment in our audience is immeasurable and my year is ruined. That about sums up all of my grievances, man. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. It's a good thing your year is almost over, though. I'm sorry that our listeners ruined your entire year.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to go over something that's still a bit family-oriented, mysterious, paranormal, kind of heartwarming, all wrapped into a neat, shiny little bow for you to listen to as you sip on a huge glass of eggnog with your life partner and stare out of the foggy glass of your wood cabin out into the white nothingness. But Kyle, what can our listeners do to make us slightly less disappointed in them next year?
Well, Nate, I think all we really want for Festivus are our listeners' ratings and reviews. You know, we just want to unwrap a brand new Apple Podcast or Spotify rating for Christmas for Festivus. You know, let us know how much we've disappointed you, the listener, over the last year. It would really make our year to let us know what you really think of the show, even if it is just a 1-star lump of coal. And as a bonus, maybe consider spreading the Festivus cheer by spreading the word about this totally awesome podcast. You know, give someone the greatest gift this season by letting them know how great it is to listen to Super Mystery Bros. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram. And all of these things are free and just take a moment of your time strictly in the non-commercial, keeping in the Festivus spirit.
Wow, I think you just totally redeemed yourself.
Woohoo!
All right, man. Are you ready to get into this one?
Yeah, I'm ready, man.
He's a man who needs no introduction. Impressive head of hair haver, pillar of the 80s heavy metal community, and possible longtime listener of the show, Dee Snider. Born on March 15th, 1955 in Massapequa, Long Island, New York, to a Jewish father and Catholic mother, Daniel Dee Snider is most famously known as the lead singer and frontman for the 80s heavy metal band Twisted Sister. With his long, bleach blonde curls, heavy use of eyeshadow and red lipstick, and sharpened teeth, some might say he was a pioneer in the drag lifestyle. For a time in the mid-1980s, he even hosted a TV show called Heavy Metal Mania, which aired on MTV. So, fun fact about Dee, he's kind of a black sheep amongst all the other 1980s heavy metal musicians in that he's a teetotaler. He claims to have only gotten drunk one time in his life, and it was when he was 14 years old, and he got so drunk that he ended up never wanting to drink again. So, good on you, Dee, bucking the 80s metal tradition of drinking Jack Daniels out of a fire hose. Also, contrary to popular belief, that was and still is his real hair. He's claimed to have never worn a wig. So that's pretty goddamn impressive if you ask me.
Yeah, I learned that watching his interview that I watched to get ready for this episode, and I realized that that crazy bleach blonde curly hair that you see him wear in the mid 80s, that
definitely not a rug.
Yeah, definitely not, man. Real hair, man. Good on you for having good hair genetics, man.
Fuck yeah, man. All right, Kyle, can you give us a brief history on Twisted Sister?
All right. For those of you listening, even if you're not a fan of Twisted Sister, which most people born outside of the 80s aren't, you've most likely heard their hit songs, We're Not Gonna Take It and I Wanna Rock. You know, whether it was on the radio, movies, commercials, I guarantee you've heard, if not both of those, at least one of them. Both of these tracks were on their third album, Stay Hungry, which went triple platinum and launched Twisted Sister into superstardom in the mid-80s. Unfortunately, Twisted Sister didn't survive for very long. They managed to pump out 5 albums in 5 years, which is impressive, you know, and just 5 years of straight blowing minds and melting faces. But they did eventually disband in 1987. Since then, they've had sporadic short reunion tours as well as playing various metal festivals, some fundraising concerts, things like that. But it is very sporadic. If you ever want a chance to see Twisted Sister live, Dee Snider has indicated that the band will reunite again in 2024. So look for those future concert dates. Yeah, that is awesome. I tried to look up future concert dates. I found one scheduled for next year in Germany. That was about it. But according to Dee, the band will reunite and start playing again next year.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't personally listen to any Twisted Sister. Although back when GTA Vice City came out and I Wanna Rock came on the radio station, I just leave it on as I did drive-bys on Innocent Bystanders. It was pretty sick. All right, so according to his IMDb page, he was once contacted by the Make-A-Wish Foundation in 1984 on behalf of a 16-year-old boy named Robert, who was dying of leukemia and whose last wish was to meet him. In 1985, Robert, in remission and recovering thanks in part to Dee's advice on bodybuilding and weight gain supplements from his hospital visit, attended an outdoor concert Twisted Sister and Iron Maiden played in Tempe, Arizona. Dee was later told by the foundation that only terminal children got wishes fulfilled, and Robert was the first recipient who ever survived. Immediately following Snider's visit, his leukemia went into remission, and though doctors told his mother the cancer could return at any time and he would die, Dee wrote in his book, Shut Up and Give Me the Mic, that Robert was still alive in his 40s and had a wife and kids. So add miracle worker / cancer cure to his resume.
Yeah, amazing.
He could probably turn water into wine if he felt like it.
Yeah, well, considering he doesn't drink, maybe he would turn water into some cancer curing
Dr. Pepper.
miracle. Dr. Pepper. Yeah, but hey, like, how about that, man? You know, the first ever Make-A-Wish kid that didn't die because he met Dee Snider.
Yeah, that's so fucking sick. So he also came out in the mid 80s and spoke out in a Senate hearing about music censorship, where certain lawmakers were trying to implement a parental warning label onto music that was deemed problematic, or whatever the term was that they used back then, along with one of Kyle and I's most esteemed artists, Frank Zappa, and they were actually successful in blocking it. So what they tried to do was introduce specific content warning labels onto records. Like, for example, if a song on the album described something violent, it would have a violence label on it. Or if a song had a lyric about alcohol, it'd have an alcohol label on it. So this whole idea was eventually scrapped, and instead they opted for just that vague parental advisory explicit content warning label instead. So mad props to you, Dee, for supporting our freedom of speech, and I think the less censorship, the better.
Well, awesome. You stole the one thing I did extra research on Dee Snider was that he teamed up with Frank Zappa against the U.S. Senate and parents for censoring music.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like to note here that I'm contractually obligated to say that we don't necessarily agree or disagree with any or all the things he's said over the years and on any of the hot takes he may have had. But what I will say is that I respect him as an anti-censorship activist and his overall right to say whatever the fuck he wants to. That, in my opinion, should never be infringed on any of us. So he once said, quote, "Most of my songs were about believing in yourself, standing up for yourself, and fighting for what you believe in," end quote. By 1987, Twisted Sister would finally be disbanded, but Dee would not go gentle into that good night. Like some generic, washed-up 80s rock star who couldn't cope with passing his prime, overdosing on heroin, or spending the 90s and 2000s living in a dumpster. No, sir, Dee would rage against the dying of the spotlight, and on and off through his own solo work, charity work, hot takes, and reality TV shows, remained in the spotlight.
However, by the year of our Lord 2003, things would take a drastic turn for the worse in Dee's personal life, when Dee's brother-in-law, who was the brother of his wife Suzette, was gunned down in broad daylight on a busy New York street. On August 18th, 2003, Dee's brother-in-law Vincent Vinny Gargiulo was walking to work just before 7 a.m. that morning when the unthinkable happened. On that particular day, the 34-year-old was part of a construction crew that was working on a Con Edison substation building on Fifth Avenue, which the local community was widely against the construction of. As he was walking on West 30th Street near Broadway, someone came up to him, pulled out a .22 cal pistol with a silencer on it, and shot him straight through the nose one time. Unfortunately, Vinny didn't stand a chance, and was found laying in a pool of blood just before 7 a.m. and died later at the hospital, having been gunned down by some chicken shit motherfucker. Ed Kyatt, whose son once lived with Vinny, called him, quote, a real sweet boy, end quote, who had some business failures in the past but finally appeared to be getting his life back on track when he was killed. According to Kyatt, he was shocked to hear about the killing and said that he saw him just 3 weeks prior, noting that he seemed very happy about his new high-paying job. Dee and his wife Suzette were devastated. Quote, it's been a bad day for me today, end quote, Dee said as he left the station house on West 35th after receiving the news.
Although it's a little bit unclear when or how, it didn't take long before the Snider family began to suspect Vinny's friend and ex-business partner, Christian Tarantino, of the murder. As it turns out, Christian Tarantino was long suspected in the murders of two other men back in 1994. The first was the killing of a 47-year-old security guard named Julius Baumgart, who was shot and killed during the botched robbery of an armored vehicle in June of 94. During the robbery, Tarantino and his three other associates, including a man by the name of Louis Dorval, tied Baumgart up and had him lie face down on the ground as Dorval shot him in the back of the head and killed him execution style. The second murder he was suspected to be involved in took place in August of 1994, just 6 weeks after the murder of Baumgart. When the Fed sought to arrest Louis Dorval on an unrelated racketeering charge, Tarantino lured him into a meeting and then murdered him. Because dead men tell no tales, I guess. Tarantino and several others stuffed his body into a plastic trunk and tossed him out into the Atlantic Ocean, but a U.S. Coast Guard ship ended up finding and retrieving the trunk several days later. So let's break this down for a moment. So they suspect this guy, Christian Tarantino, of murdering Vinny, and he was also suspected of these two other murders that happened back in 94. One was against a armored truck security guard, and then the other murder was the guy who murdered the armored truck security guard. So it's like he murdered the guy who murdered the other guy to kind of tie up a loose end, allegedly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, tying up loose ends. You know, the guy that could, you know, put him away for life if the cops ever caught him and forced info out of him. You know, you just shut him up forever. Vinny was once not so much of a straight shooter himself, and was at one point in his life involved in organized crime with Tarantino in some capacity, but by all accounts, at the time of his death, was deeply committed to putting that lifestyle behind him and living on the straight and narrow. But with that said, he had secretly recorded a meeting with Tarantino in September 2000, which he intended to use as evidence in case Tarantino or anyone else decided to falsely implicate him in any of the two murders. In the recordings, Tarantino implicated himself in the murder of Baumgart and the disposal of Dorval's body. And in 2003, a full 3 years after he made the recording, Vinny revealed to Tarantino that he had taped the meeting and threatened that he would take the tape to the FBI if he wasn't compensated for business losses. So, in other words, Vinny was using this secretly recorded audio tape as blackmail, or, in other words, a defense against Tarantino to never rat him out.
Yeah.
Vinny ended up writing a letter to the FBI offering to produce the tape, which would prove Tarantino's guilt in the two 1994 slayings. But before they could set up a meeting with Vinny to acquire it, Vinny had been conveniently gunned down in the streets of New York City.
So that, in a nutshell, is the story of Vinny Gargiulo's death.
Do you think a conspiracy is in there anywhere? Like someone... Do you think a conspiracy is in there anywhere? Like he wrote a letter to the FBI, and then before they could meet him, he was gunned down? Like how...
Well, he had already revealed to Tarantino that he had this tape.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think what's implied here is that he revealed that he had the tape, and then Tarantino had him immediately killed.
But he threatened to release it to the FBI. But then he actually wound up writing a letter to the FBI to set up a meeting. And
right. So I think what happened was that Vinny wanted to be compensated for some sort of business losses that I don't know the details around these business losses, but I think that he blamed Tarantino for these business losses, and he wanted to be compensated for it. And he was using this tape as blackmail to get it.
Yeah. Well,
and so I guess maybe he refused to compensate him, and that's when he wrote the letter to the FBI. And then shortly after that is when he got shot by somebody.
So you think the timing is coincidental, which is, it probably is, you know, that was just.
Yeah, I do think it is coincidental.
Yeah.
But that's not really the mystery here.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Sorry for going off track, but hey, this is why you don't blackmail a murderer, you know?
I guess, man. But anyway, that in a nutshell is the story of Vinnie Gargiulo's death. But the story doesn't end here, dear listener. As the Snider family were picking up the pieces of their shattered lives after this horrible tragedy, they began working tirelessly at bringing Tarantino to justice. In their hearts, they knew that he was responsible, and the authorities knew it too, but the evidence to make an arrest simply wasn't there. So let's talk about this Christian Tarantino guy. What were your impressions of him, just seeing pictures of him in articles and reading a little bit about him?
Oh, just, you know, you're the typical image you could possibly conjure in your mind to a criminal and a murderer that owned and operated a string of gyms, of fitness centers, just a meathead Giga Chad with just a shady look on his face, you know.
I wouldn't call him a Giga Chad. Like, when I see a picture of him, I don't really imagine like a mafia lord or a mob boss. I imagine that guy on that new haircut YouTube video. Just fucking absolute Guido douchebag, you know?
Yeah. This is my new fucking haircut.
This is my new fucking haircut. You know what that means? I'm getting some fucking pussy tonight. Yeah. My boys, they're all coming out. They all got the same haircut. They're getting some fucking pussy tonight.
Drinking Jaeger bombs.
I'm going to be drinking Heinekens and Jaeger bombs all night long. Bitches love my haircut. And if they don't, fucking skanks.
Yeah. To our listeners who have never seen this classic YouTube clip, you've got to go check that out.
Just type in new haircut.
Yeah, new haircut. It's a riot. But yeah, that's exactly what comes to both of our minds when we see a picture of this guy.
Yeah. But one thing that the Snider family didn't count on were strange, ghostly happenings to occur, which would lead Dee Snider from going from skeptic into believer in the paranormal. In the LMN TV show Celebrity Ghost Stories, Dee Snider sat down and told his story to the world. So just a note here, this TV show is our only source on the paranormal side of the story. So go watch it if you're curious. The YouTube video is in our source notes for this episode. But here is our paraphrased Cliff Notes version. So according to Dee, he's a rational, scientifically minded guy who was never really into the paranormal. And he would just dismiss strange things that would happen, like, you know, seeing something out of the corner of your eye or a cabinet opening, or if there's like a noise that happens, you just dismiss that. Dee Snider had known Vinnie since he was a little kid and described him as a great guy who he always got along with. When Vinnie was gunned down, the Snider family immediately knew who was responsible, but felt powerless and frustrated at not being able to have the man arrested due to the lack of evidence. And to know who was responsible for the murder, but being unable to do anything about it was frustrating.
Quote, "Really? It's an incredible feeling of frustration to know who's responsible for the death of a loved one and not be able to do anything about it," end quote, he said in the interview. Dee's wife Suzette was absolutely tormented by this, and it affected her both on a psychological level and on a physical level, which in turn affected the whole family. But shortly after the death of Vinnie, strange, unexplained events began happening in the Snider home. What Dee Snider would normally dismiss as coincidences began to pile up in such a way that had him questioning his own line of rational thinking. First, picture frames began to inexplicably fall from the wall. Not just one or two, but up to a dozen of them at a time. Quote, "You heard the crash come down and you ran in to see what fell, and my wife would say, 'That's Vinnie, that's Vinnie. He's trying to reach out to me,' end quote." Suzette took these happenings as a sign from her dead brother, that he wanted her to work harder to bring his murderer to justice, and it soon began to consume every waking hour of her life for months on end. Then, late one evening, as they came home from dinner, the two could hear their son Shane's drums being played upstairs, which Shane became very angry, believing that his little brother Cody was on his drums. After Shane went to the intercom system to give Cody a piece of his mind, they were shocked and horrified by what they saw. Cody walked in from another room downstairs and said he wasn't on the drums. According to Dee, there was nobody else in the house, and there was no one else in that room to play the drums. So, just to break it down, the family walks in the front door downstairs, right? And they hear the drums being played upstairs. Immediately, they think it's the youngest son up there banging on his older brother's drums. He's upset. You know, it's a rich people house. They have that intercom on the wall, and he chimes through the intercom to, "Hey, get off my drums, dude." And he just appears from a room right next to them downstairs. No one is upstairs. The drums are making noise on their own.
Yeah.
By this point, Dee was still unable to accept the reality that something truly unexplainable was happening in his home. However, his wife Suzette was fully convinced that her dead brother was trying to reach out to them from beyond the grave, to let them know that he was not at rest. Suzette was balls deep into books on the paranormal by this time, and had decided to try to talk to the spirit directly and to give them a sign that it was Vinny. In the bedroom late one night, with the TV on, Suzette decided to start talking to Vinny's ghost. Quote, "Vinny, if it's you who's doing all this stuff in the house, if it's you who's trying to reach out to us, if you can hear me, make something happen with the TV," end quote, Suzette said. As soon as she finished her sentence, the TV turned off. Quote, "It wasn't a delayed response. It was do something with the TV, bam, it goes off," end quote, Dee Snider said. The two were stumped as to how to properly communicate with Vinny, and wanting to desperately know what he was trying to tell them, they decided to enlist the help of an unnamed, top-notch psychic. According to Dee, the psychic wasn't asking for any information. He was just looking away with a pen and a notepad, writing things down the entire time, but was able to successfully relay a message from Vinny, a message telling them to move on, that he's happier now and to just let it go. So to break this down too, this was in the episode, the Celebrity Ghost Stories episode. Dee describes briefly some of his experience with other psychics, you know, and they're generally very like happy and outgoing, and they want to engage with you to be able to, you know, get on your wavelength, right? This guy, not like any psychic they had ever seen before, just no eye contact, just looking around the room, scribbling down. It was definitely a different experience for them.
Right. So Suzette was pissed, as any one of us would be, having just been told to give up on the effort to bring her brother's killer to justice by some grifting psychic shithead. She immediately thought that the psychic just told her some load of bullshit. She was convinced that he had just scammed her out of her money and didn't even have the decency to tell her what she wanted to hear, and instead told her something completely unexpected. Instead of telling her not to stop pursuing justice on her brother's behalf, he told her basically not to bother with it anymore. However, Dee, on the other hand, had a different interpretation of the message than his wife did. And since the session was recorded on an audio tape, he went back and listened to it again and transcribed it onto paper. He then handed it to her in a written form and told her to read it. Quote, "Read what he said, not who said it, what was said. You got your answers," end quote, Dee told her. So I'd like to just read what the note said, but I'm not sure if this is the actual note or if it's just a prop note that the TV show displayed. So keep that in mind. I'm not sure if it's the real one or not. But it read, quote, "The truth will be revealed. Let it go. There's nothing you can do about it. The murderer will be brought to justice. Let it go. It will all come out in the wash," end quote.
Suzette was finally able to understand that Vinny wasn't actually telling her to move on because it was hopeless. He was telling her to move on because justice would eventually come on its own, and that she was powerless to help speed it along. Then, late one night, as the family were watching TV together, they heard somebody walking down the hall, and as they turned to look, They all saw a man with dark hair. Dee immediately sprang into action and ran after the man, but found that he had vanished into another room. The family concluded that they had just witnessed Vinny leave the family home, and for the very last time, as no further paranormal activity took place after this last sighting. Although Vinny's killer, Christian Tarantino, was still out walking free at this point, Suzette felt at ease knowing for a fact that it was Vinny who was talking to them. Dee had his wife back, the kids had their mother back, and balance was returned to the force. And for years, life returned to a sense of normalcy. The family did what Vinny's spirit requested and moved on with their lives the best they could.
In the following 10 years or so, Dee Snider had a whirlwind of successes, much more so than the average washed-up 80s rock star. He released 3 solo albums, participated in several reality TV shows, including with other possible longtime listener of the show, Donald J. Trump, on his hit television show Celebrity Apprentice. He also acted in several movies and TV shows, and hosted his own syndicated radio show. On top of this, he and his old band Twisted Sister reunited in 2006 to release their final studio album, what would become the most successful heavy metal-themed Christmas album of all time, titled A Twisted Christmas. So go pick yourself up a copy of that before Monday. Speaking of Grand Theft Auto, that same year he also did some voice acting for the video game Vice City Stories. Goddamn, dude, this guy has accomplished more in 10 years of his life than I could do in 10 full lifetimes of my own.
Yeah, a real professional, entertainer, musician, artist, all that stuff. Very well-rounded.
Yep.
Then, in 2011, Vinny's alleged killer, Christian Tarantino, would finally be brought to justice, but not for Vinny's murder. Just several months after Vinny's death, a copy of the audio recording had been anonymously mailed to the FBI, and analysts at Quantico would confirm its authenticity. In May of 2011, after a jury of his peers listened to the tape of him implicating himself in the murders of the security guard Julius Baumgart and his criminal associate Louis Dorval, the jury found him guilty in the 2 murders, but could not reach a verdict in the case of Dee's brother-in-law, Vinny. However, following a retrial in May of 2012, justice was finally served to Tarantino, ice cold on a rusty metal platter, as the jury found him guilty of conspiracy to murder Vinny Gargiulo to obstruct justice. Tarantino exploded into a fit of what is colloquially known as roid rage. Quote, "Based on what information?" Tarantino, 44, shouted. Told to be quiet by a federal marshal, Tarantino continued, "I will not be quiet. Based on what information? Pablo Amador said it? You are crazy. Crazy," end quote. According to prosecutors, Tarantino paid Justin Bressman, who was an employee of the gym that he owned, a sum of $35,000 to carry out the hit against Vinny Gargiulo on his behalf.
So as for the hitman Justin Bressman himself, he appeared to be a victim of the same MO that befell Dorval and Vinny. Shortly after the murder, his car was found burned to a crisp in Brooklyn, and he, or his body, have never been found. What a dumbass if he didn't see that one coming.
Right.
Each of the 3 murder convictions carried mandatory life sentences. Quote, Christian Tarantino, 46, was so successful making money hand over fist in a series of daring armed robberies that Gambino crime family scion John Jr. Gotti tried to shake him down for a taste of the profits, end quote, a source told the New York Post. At the time of his conviction, Tarantino was suffering from Parkinson's disease and told the victims' families that he would pay for his crimes. Quote, "Talk about suffering," he said as his arm shook. "You can count on it. I am," end quote. He also apologized. The judge wasn't buying his crocodile tears or his new fucking haircut, and she went off, saying that it was obvious that he wasn't truly remorseful and described him as a, quote, "violent, cruel, cunning person who chose to commit these crimes," end quote. Suzette Snider, after the conclusion of the trial, told reporters, quote, "I'm happy that it's over and done," end quote. So, for more information along with the summary of the case, we'd like to just read through an excerpt from FBI.gov dated May 14th, 2012.
Before we dig into this excerpt, I just want to say how, impressive it is from a criminal standpoint that even the infamous John Gotti wanted a piece of this guy's action because he was doing so well in the illegal money-making market. Earlier today, Christian Tarantino, the owner of Synergy Fitness Clubs on Long Island and New York City, was sentenced to 3 terms of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for his role in the murders of 3 men between 1994 and 2003. The sentence was imposed by the Honorable Joanna Sabert, United States District Judge for the Eastern District of New York and the United States Courthouse in Central Islip, New York. Today's proceeding marks the culmination of a lengthy investigation and prosecution by the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, the Nassau County Police Department, and the New York City Police Department. Following jury trials in 2011 and 2012, Tarantino was convicted of participating in an armored car robbery in June 1994, during which a 47-year-old guard was shot and killed. Orchestrating the August 1994 murder of an associate in that robbery, whose body Tarantino dumped from a boat several miles off the coast of Long Island, and conspiring to murder a longtime confidant who had threatened to take evidence of the first 2 murders to the FBI.
On June 23, 1994, Tarantino, Louis Dorval, and 2 others ambushed guards of the Mid-Island Check Cashing Company as they delivered cash to a business in Syosset, New York. As Tarantino and his associates handcuffed one guard, Dorval shot and killed Julius Baumgart in the back of the head as he lay face down on the pavement. 6 weeks later, when federal law enforcement sought to arrest Dorval on charges in an unrelated racketeering indictment, Tarantino lured Dorval to his own death and, with the help of others, stuffed Dorval's body in a plastic tool trunk that he then dumped at sea. A U.S. Coast Guard vessel pulled Dorval's body out of the Atlantic several days later, but the investigations into both killings remained open. In 2000, the U.S. Attorney's Office, FBI, and NCPD began to gather DNA evidence from several individuals. FBI forensic examiners subsequently found a match between Tarantino's mitochondrial DNA and a hair fragment recovered 6 years earlier by the NCPD from a getaway car abandoned near the scene of the Baumgart murder. The investigation also led to the arrest of an associate of Tarantino who pled guilty in 2001 to engaging in a racketeering murder conspiracy to kill Dorval. The collection of DNA evidence also led Tarantino's longtime confidant, Vincent Gargiulo, to secretly tape record a September 2000 conversation with Tarantino in an apparent effort to secure evidence that would prevent Tarantino or others from falsely implicating Gargiulo in either the Baumgart or Dorval murders. In that recording, Tarantino implicated himself in both the Baumgart murder and the killing and disposal of Dorval's body. In 2003, Gargiulo revealed the existence of the recording to Tarantino and others and threatened to make the tape available to the FBI if he was not compensated for business losses. Thereafter, Gargiulo wrote the FBI a letter offering to produce a tape that would prove Tarantino's guilt in the 2 1994 killings. However, before the FBI obtained the tape, Tarantino hired a Synergy Fitness gym employee to kill Gargiulo for $35,000. On the morning of August 18, 2003, as Gargiulo walked to work at a construction site in Manhattan, that employee approached his victim and fired a single shot from a .22 caliber target pistol into the bridge of Gargiulo's nose. Gargiulo was pronounced dead a short time later in Bellevue Hospital.
Several months later, Gargiulo's tape recording was anonymously mailed to the homicide detectives of the NYPD. Analysis by the FBI's Forensic Audio Lab in Quantico, Virginia, confirmed its authenticity, and at the subsequent trials, juries heard Tarantino admit to his role in the armored car robbery and the subsequent dumping of Dorval's body at sea. In May 2011, a jury convicted Tarantino of participating in the murders of Julius Baumgart and Louis Dorval, but failed to reach a verdict on the Gargiulo murder charges. Following a retrial in May 2012, a second jury convicted Tarantino of conspiracy to murder Gargiulo to obstruct justice. Each of the counts of conviction carried mandatory life terms of imprisonment. Quote, for almost a decade, Christian Tarantino was a one-man crime spree, engaging in armed robbery, murder, and murder conspiracy to cover his tracks, end quote, stated United States Attorney Lynch. Quote, he controlled his Confederates the old-fashioned way, by murdering them. As this investigation and prosecution demonstrate, law enforcement will never halt its efforts to ensure that murderers are brought to justice. Tarantino thought that human life was his to take. He will now spend the rest of his life contemplating the just results of his actions, end quote. Miss Lynch extended her grateful appreciation to the Nassau County Police Department, the New York City Police Department, the New York County District Attorney's Office, and the New York State Department of Corrections Office of the Inspector General for their assistance. FBI Assistant Director in Charge Venizelos stated, quote, because he ruthlessly took the lives of 3 others, Tarantino will spend the rest of his life behind bars. One victim was an innocent man doing his job, murdered in cold blood during a robbery. One was a robbery confederate of Tarantino, whom he killed for fear of cooperation with the government. The third victim was also killed to silence him when he threatened to expose Tarantino. This murderous conduct has been met with stern justice, end quote, end of article. So, Tarantino, you know, he definitely stuck to the old way of thinking of dead men tell no tales, but with modern technology, with modern forensic technology, that doesn't fly anymore. And if anyone's ever seen a single episode of CSI, NCIS, Bones, that shows that, yeah, you really can't get away with really anything anymore.
You can't get away with murder in I don't know, past the year 1990, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're even finding like serial killers like from the 80s now.
Yeah, and you don't even need a DNA sample to link it to. I mean, if they've got your DNA sample, but they don't have you're not even on their suspect list, they can go onto genealogy websites and find out who you're closely related to and then narrow you down that way.
Oh, yeah.
So there's just no getting away with that shit anymore. And with that, dear listener, Dee Snider and family lived happily ever after, moving on with their lives and apparently not encountering the spirit of Vinny ever again, or being witness to any further paranormal activity, either in their home or elsewhere. Skeptics may conclude that the psychic that Dee and his wife hired just wrote down some generic bullshit, some mumbo-jumbo that was so vague that it would probably either turn out to be right someday just by default, or be just enough to make them feel satisfied with the message they got, ceasing to worry and believing that it will all come out in the wash. However, believers in the paranormal, particularly the spirit realm, may conclude that the ghost of Vinny did in fact reach out to the Snider family from beyond the grave with a message of comfort and hope to stop trying, just move on, and it'll all be okay in the end. Christian Tarantino, convicted murderer and Guido douche, remains incarcerated for his heinous crimes, where nobody cares about his protein powder or his new fucking haircut, locked away someplace where he will never taste the sweet nectar of a Jaeger bomb or a Heineken ever again. The end. Kyle, your thoughts go.
You know, I don't think it's any real mystery. You know, this episode definitely not about the murder of Vinny Gargiulo. That's been solved. This episode, just to reiterate, is on was Vinny's ghost actually in the Snider home? And I say yes. You know, it all lines up way too perfect. You know, with all the strange happenings immediately following his death, and then the immediate cease of paranormal happenings after Vinny's sister has agreed to move on, to let it go, and to get her life back on track. You know, it all adds up. And for those of you who, you know, don't believe in ghosts or poo-poo the paranormal and that sort of thing, just know that some people are a lot more sensitive to that kind of thing. My wife, for one, you know, very more receptive to spiritual activity and things like that. I, for one, am not, but it's not like I don't believe in it. I just believe that other people, you know, they just have, you know, a closer connection, you know. But when you have something like this and you take someone like Dee Snider, you know, who is definitely a skeptic, and he is also witnessing all these things, it can't be ignored that a paranormal entity, a spirit, if you will, is definitely in the house trying to communicate. And
just sorry to interrupt you, but like I was also a skeptic before I had my own encounter with some weird shit. So yeah, I mean, I tend to kind of take the story at face value.
Yeah. I for one have had no real encounters, like not even on your level, but you know, I do accept that people have their own encounters, and other people are more susceptible, more sensitive to the paranormal, you know. And so you just, you know, you can't just poo-poo things because you can't see it or you can't explain it, you know. The spirit realm is there, and sometimes it does bleed over into our side, especially if a spirit's will is strong enough to wish to communicate.
Yeah, I don't know how any of that shit works, but you know, I don't really have much in the way of actual thoughts about this story other than that I wanted to simply tell the story because it's not really one that I've heard talked about very often, and it's such like an obscure story that it doesn't get a lot of attention. Like, I think you could argue that the psychic told the family just a bunch of bullshit just to make them feel better, you know, both about their situation and, you know, feel better about giving him their money. But I sort of just accept it at face value, and I just trust him for some reason. I think that the story is probably true, because if you can't trust Dee Snider, who can you trust, honestly?
Nobody.
It doesn't get much more trustworthy than Dee Snider. So yeah. I do want to note here, though, that I do have a similar experience to sort of back up what Dee Snider said happened in the story. And it's one of those memories that lingered way back in the deep, wrinkly part of my brain until this story kind of brought it out again. But back in, I think it was 2007, my grandma passed away in the hospital. And shortly after my mom broke the news to me, I remember I went into the kitchen and I flicked on the light switch kind of out of habit. It was this light switch that had been broken for ages, but for whatever reason, you know, I guess it was like muscle memory. I went into the kitchen and I flicked on the light switch, and bam, it just suddenly started working again. So, you know, basically just moments after my grandma had passed away, this light switch just magically was fixed, and it had been broken for, I don't even know how long, months, maybe over a year. You know, I passed it off as a coincidence, but my mom was insisting that it was grandma that did it. I was just sort of like an asshole teenager, so I was like, yeah, whatever, mom. But, you know, you know, the light switch just started working again for a short time before it finally went back to being a broken piece of shit. So
yeah, could be a coincidence for sure, but you know, the timing of stuff like that, it at the very least should make you at least question it.
Yeah, I mean, was it my grandma coming back from the dead to fix the light switch in the same way that Vinny came back to turn off the TV? Like, I have no fucking idea, but it's just one of those similar kind of experiences. That's basically all I've got, though. I trust the story. I don't think that Dee Snider needed to go on some shitty TV show to tell us all like a fake ghost story.
Yeah.
You know, even though some people might consider him as like a has-been, I don't consider him to be a has-been. No. But other people might. Yeah. He still has like way better things to do with his time than to just sit in front of a camera and tell just straight up lies. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. His
fame, you know, didn't stop in 1987 when Twisted Sister broke up the first time, because they've come together and split multiple times since then. But he's also, like our article said, you know, he's been in movies and he's done many fundraising events, charity events. He's made a movie. I know he's made at least one movie too.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, he directed I forget the name. It was an acronym, and it was the last track of their very first album. It was like Wicked Motherfuckers or some shit like that. Or like Twisted Motherfuckers, Sick Motherfuckers, I don't know. It was something like that.
Something
but
with motherfuckers in it.
Yeah, something with motherfuckers. That was the name of the movie. And in my brief research today, I linked that to the last track title of their first album.
Yeah, he's a great man.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one, it wasn't one I was like planning to come up with any theories or try to solve this in any way. I kind of just wanted to sort of let this one sit and marinate with our listeners because, well, for one, it's interesting, and two, I think it can kind of help spread some holiday cheer.
Yeah.
I don't think it's my place to question Dee Snider on what he experienced in his own home. So
yeah, and I think a good message to take from this episode is, if you, the listener, have had, something horrendous happen in your life and it's immediately followed by something that might be paranormal or something that's like unexplainable, you don't have to go out and hire a psychic to give you help, but maybe just open your mind to some other possibilities that you may have not thought of before. It might open your eyes, it might help you move on.
I couldn't agree with that more, man. All right. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we get out of here?
I don't think so. Oh, so a lot of times you like to title people as pillars of the community. I would like to title Dee Snider as just a pillar of humanity, and that's
pillar
why
of the human community.
Yeah, pillar of the human community. Well put.
All right, man. You got any apologies, shout outs, or clarifications to make before we go?
You know what? I just want to give a shout out to the ghost of Vinny Gargiulo, because a lot of times, you hear about these stories, you read about these things, people are murdered, and their ghost sticks around and they're very, malevolent. They want revenge. They want people to seek revenge or justice or things like that. But Vinny's spirit stuck around to let his sister know that, hey, you do not need to beat yourself up over this. Everything will be fine. Go back to being you. Go back to being a wife and a mother. Go back to your family, right? Don't let my demise ruin your life. So big shout out to Vinny's spirit, man. That's very big of you to, really comfort your sister and let her know it's okay to move on.
Yeah, shout out to Vinny's ghost. I'd like to give a quick shout out to the Washbrook Show for recording another bang up intro for us on this episode. So go follow him on Instagram. He's a grown man who makes videos of himself playing with Transformers toys, and that's fucking sick. So go check him out at the Washbrook Show on Instagram.
Living the dream, man.
Living the fucking dream, playing with Transformers toys and making little videos. Lastly, I'd also like to apologize to all of our Guido listeners out there, and I hope that bitches love your new fucking haircut, and if they don't, fucking skanks.
Just fucking skanks.
All right, man, I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Remember, folks, the truth is out there, somewhere in the ether. And through our powers combined, we'll solve that sumbitch once and for all.
This is Super Mystery Bros.
But dude, like I'll tell you what, man. Like I was like into working on this script, and then Caitlin was like, "Hey, let's go to the DMV right now and get these licenses banged out." And
you didn't tell her that you had more important things to do?
No, I didn't. Well, and in all fairness,
she'd been like, "Not now, Chief. I'm in the fucking zone."
it's exactly what that picture fucking reminds me of. Jaeger bombs.